What's commonly a very exciting time in your life can go downhill real quick. Let's talk about it. So, when we talk about motherhood, we usually talk about and think about the beautiful aspect that motherhood is. You're a new mom, parenting, you just went through this like glorious process, and something so beautiful has just come from you, and you're in this new stage of life that's really exciting. But I think what's not talked about as frequent or in a way that is just enough is the other side of motherhood, which are the postpartum struggles that are really common these days. And I think because they're common, they're generally not understood. So, as the expert in this, how did you think people generally view the postpartum experience? And have you noticed any changes in the way it's talked about lately?
Yeah, great question. Um, so definitely, when we think about the postpartum period, a lot of times there's this idea that, I'm so in love with my baby, my life is perfect, everything is amazing, but there are also challenges that come with, becoming a parent. And those challenges back in the day, I think during our parents' time, weren't really talked about. There was a lot of shame surrounding, whether the mental health or just the challenges of becoming a parent. There's this idea that, I'm supposed to be grateful that now I have a baby and I shouldn't
Yeah,
talk about all these other challenges that I have.
yeah,
But now there is a little bit more, especially because of social media, there's more awareness on, the mental health challenges and just in general, just the life challenges that come with having a baby. As amazing as it is, it could also be very difficult. And there's, three most common feelings that are attached, that kind of happen during that time, which is shame, anger, and grief. And we'll talk a little bit more about that during this time.
yeah. And I think you hit on a really great point as well, which comes up in a lot of these videos that we film together, is the influence on social media and so many of these
Yeah.
mental health aspects.
Yeah.
So I'm not a parent, so I can't say specifically, but I would assume that the postpartum experience and seeing certain things on social media that might be the complete opposite is also harmful and
Yeah.
influences those feelings of shame, of grief, of guilt, whatever it is. Would you say that's something that's probably happening a lot more these days?
So it's funny that you say that because the other day, I think it was even this week, that I saw a social media influencer. She said that everyone is kind of saying that people are having less children because of like it's a lot more expensive, or all
Mm,
these other reasons. But she's like, I think we're just being more honest about the challenges of having children.
yeah,
And so there's you know it's amazing, right? we
yeah.
it's good to raise awareness and all these challenges that come during the postpartum period. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's once other women understand, like, oh wait, this is a lot. It's not just gonna uh affect me physically, but emotionally as well, in so many
Hmm.
different aspects of my life. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think it is good, when a woman does decide to have a child. It's good to be able to make that decision, knowing about everything that's going to come with, because a lot
Yeah,
of these challenges that come during the postpartum period is because it's like, no one told me it could be difficult to breastfeed.
yeah,
No one told me about grieving the person that I was before having a
before.
child, right? Like, I can
Hmm.
be everyone's like, oh, you're going to be so happy once you have a baby, but like, now there's a part of you that's like, wait, what happened to me? I'm not the same person that I used to be before I had a
Yeah,
baby. So like, we want to raise the awareness, but yeah, with that also comes this fear sometimes.
yep,
But I feel like it's important to know, to make an informed decision when you
yeah,
do decide to have a baby.
yeah.
Kind of
And
know what
not
that
let,
will be with. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
and not let, no, and not let the social media. I always just see this like aesthetic version of motherhood show up on
Yeah.
social media. And I can only imagine comparing yourself to that when you're in these postpartum stages, if you're not feeling that way or have that vision for yourself. So I can only
Right.
imagine how that influences the emotional and mental health impacts on one who just became a mother or about to. So, yeah. Um,
100%.
you touched on grieving. And this is
Yeah.
something until I started talking to you more, I didn't really know much about. Like I didn't think about it in that way again because I'm not a mother, so I haven't put in myself in that position. But can you explain a little bit more of where the grief steps in during the postpartum stages?
Yeah. Um, once you become a mother, a lot of times I hear of mothers that they grieve the person that they were before they had a baby, or grieving
Mm-hmm.
the person that they could have been if they didn't have a baby so young, right? If I didn't have a baby when I was 19 or 20, like I could have been all these other things and now I
Yeah.
can't, or they feel like they can't, right? Or grieving the relationship dynamics that you had with older children, right? Sometimes I hear moms that say, I was so close to my older child, and now that I had a baby, my child is like upset at me. They don't want to hang out with me as much. Or grieving the relationship that you had with your partner before you had a baby, right?
Mm,
There's a lot of relationship
yeah.
changes that suddenly happen. There's a lot more stress, whether it's just, financial stress or just life stressors that happen once you have a baby. There's a lot of sleepless nights. Sometimes there's some lack of intimacy, right? Whether it's because, your body has just gone through a lot, and you're not at the point where you want to be intimate with your partner, or maybe you do want to be intimate with your partner, but you don't really know how that would look like now after, having a C-section, or even a natural birth. But there's a lot of, right, so there's a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And you're grieving all of that. There's also just grieving the um the expectations that you had for your delivery, right? Sometimes
Yes.
moms thought, they prepared for months, I'm going to have a natural birth. And they took all these birthing classes, and then
Yeah.
suddenly when it's time to give birth, they end up having a C-section. So
Right.
sometimes, moms do grieve what they thought their delivery will look like.
Yeah.
Or even, if they ended up having a natural birth, they, thought that, the nurses will be a lot nicer, or their
Mm-hmm.
OB or their midwife, or, and suddenly they were like, wait, it didn't meet my expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
My treatment while I was giving birth. Or
Mm-hmm.
some moms grieve, not being able to breastfeed, whether it's
Right.
because they didn't have enough supply, or their baby didn't latch, or
Yeah.
just all these expectations that you had for yourself. Sometimes we want to process all those feelings, and we want to realize this is, you're really grieving, what you thought the postpartum experience would be like, and it didn't meet your expectations.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense when you hear it in those words, right? Like you went through a huge change. So it's
Yeah.
got to be very common to then look back and think of like, oh, if I didn't do this now, or, I used to do all these things and now I'm not doing them. And now I feel like I'm losing myself, or I just lost that person that I was. Like, am I still not that person? So much comes up with, even in the future, it's like grieving, what could be because I'm not
Mhm.
there yet, all those types of things. Now, how does that translate into anger, which is another major point that you made in the beginning of this that a lot of women might feel, or people just might feel in general in this stage
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a point, just going back to, grief, this feeling of like feeling lost. So
Mm-hmm.
this idea that like I'm not the person that I used to be, and I'm not, you know, the person that I'm going to become. So like the postpartum period is a transitional period. And it's true, you're not the person that you were, and you're not like, someone that has been a mom for 10, 20 years.
Right.
So you feel lost. And
Yeah.
we oftentimes have that feeling, right? The transitional periods in our life suddenly make us feel lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a time to, it's a beautiful time to kind of like reinvent yourself, and get to the point where you're, this like 2.0 version of
Yeah.
yourself. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
going through an upgrade, but
Mm-hmm.
this upgrade period is like it's
It's
feeling very
tricky.
awkward and lost.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if we don't kind of give ourselves the time to realize, okay, this is a very awkward time, and it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be okay. There is, a lot of feelings of anger.
Mm-hmm.
So, angry that your partner's life or body did not change as much as yours, right? I hear moms that are like, he's able to go out and have fun and do all these things, or wear all these clothes that he used to before we had a child, and I can't do that.
Right.
Grieving certain relationships, whether it's friendships, right? Like if suddenly you're the only one in your group of friends that had a child and all your friends didn't, and your lifestyle just don't match as much sometimes. you know you let go of certain friendships just because now that you had a child, your values don't align. You
Right.
suddenly realize that maybe a friend that was, an anti-vaxxer, that was like something that didn't bother you. But now that you have a child and you know that she didn't vaccinate her kids, that could be very difficult for you to have your children play together. And sometimes
Mhm.
that means then maybe, I have to let go of that friendship just because our values don't align now that we both have children.
Yeah.
Also, just there's a lot of anger surrounding, families families help did not meet your expectations. You thought,
Mm.
my sister was going to be there for me, my mom, my in-laws, and
Mhm.
like suddenly like they're nowhere to be found, or maybe they
Mhm.
are there but they're making my postpartum experience a lot harder, right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Mhm.
I'm the one that had the baby, why is everyone making it
Yeah.
about them? Or
Yeah.
also anger. I see a lot of mothers being very angry at their partner for making their postpartum experience harder. It's like, why is he making it about himself? Why, he's saying, well, my life changed too, or right, like all that stuff, because there isn't, uh, just like there's some break in communication, or both uh,
Mhm.
couples are very, they're just not feeling good in their relationship because they're
Yeah.
just going through a
In a
lot.
different space.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of moms are like, well, I'm the one that had the baby, why is he making it about himself? But now we also know that there is something called postpartum depression in men,
Yeah.
and it's not just women that go through it as well. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of that.
Mhm.
So
Ties to
anger is definitely a big feeling after having a baby. Yeah.
yeah. And then you spoke on one more point, which was shame. So,
Yeah.
how does that show up in this stage? And what are maybe some examples of what this looks like as well?
Yeah. So you know, when we started this talk, we were kind of talking about how we thought of motherhood as being this like perfect time.
Mhm.
And right now we, we're trying to debunk all this like myths about being the perfect mom and how's everything is amazing. So like right now there as much as we're working on it, there's still shame surrounding, mental health, either whether it's postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, shame
Mhm.
surrounding intrusive thoughts, right? Intrusive
Mhm.
thoughts are these scary feelings that, you're holding your baby and you're thinking, oh my God, am I going to drop my baby? Or you're walking with your baby in the street and it's like, oh my God, what if like a car hits my baby, right? Like all these scary thoughts. And it's like, I can't talk about this because what type of mom I am to even think about it. But
Right.
you're actually an amazing mom because you're, what anxiety is, it's like it's trying to protect us from harm. So it's thinking of like the worst case scenario. So you're an amazing mom for wanting to protect your baby, but then you have all these scary thoughts, right? So there
Yeah.
is a lot of shame surrounding, body image, especially social media. I mean, social media is
Oh,
amazing in some ways, and I love the influencers that are like, this is how my body looks like after having a baby. And
yeah.
other influencers are like, I snapped back, right?
Yeah,
Like
you
my
could be
body is
this way.
perfect.
Yeah.
Like I'm good, right? Like shame
Yeah.
surrounding, you know, breastfeeding, right? For those moms
Mm.
that are unable to breastfeed. I know for me, as much as I tried with my two daughters to breastfeed them, I didn't have enough supply, the latching, like there were a lot of, complications there. And I even remember having shame, and being like, why am I not able to exclusively breastfeed my children? And I know a lot of mothers have that as well. Um,
Mhm.
there's also, you're getting a lot of unsolicited advice, which is, where anger comes in also. But,
Yeah.
if I'm,
Yeah.
let's say, like feeding my baby, with a bottle, and
Mhm.
someone is like, oh, you should really breastfeed. And it's like, there's this feeling of shame suddenly, but then you're like, but I
Mhm.
wasn't able to, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely, a lot of emotions.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. And now going through this cycle of postpartum, what
Mm.
would you tell a client typically? Like, how do we navigate out of this stage? Or like, do we navigate out of it? How do we bring ourselves around that corner?
Yeah. I think the one thing that I do with my clients is um we take the time to process these emotions, whether it's
Mhm.
shame, anger, grief, to validate
Mhm.
and to really talk about each thing. Another thing, I do realize that when moms do get to the point where they're feeling these strong emotions, they're oftentimes really they're burnt out. And we
Yeah.
want to take the time to go back to who were you before you had a baby, right? Like this feeling of, if you're grieving the person that you were before you had a baby, we talk, I have this exercise, it's called the Who I Am exercise. And
Mhm.
I love talking to moms. We go through questions, and one of them is, what did you used to love doing when you were a child? And I watched these moms suddenly light up, and it's like, I used to
Oh,
love,
yeah.
you know, riding my bike. I used to love playing with mud. I had a mother that was like, I love playing with mud. And then the next day she like went and played with mud with her children, because it's like, this is what brought me joy. Or I used to love riding my bike. And when I asked them, do you still do that? It's like, you know what? I didn't ride my
Yeah,
bike
it's
for so long. I
realization.
want to go back to doing that.
Mhm.
Or even when it comes to, if you're having some troubles with your partner, we talk about, okay, let's I have this relationship exercise that I go through with my clients, and we talk about, okay, what made you two connect? Like, what
In the
worked
beginning,
in
yeah.
your relationship in the beginning? What's
Mhm.
not working now? What's the, one thing that you really struggle with your partner? What's one thing that your partner struggles with you? And we kind of go through that, and we set, like relationship goals and the steps to achieve those relationship goals. So sometimes it
Yeah.
really is about going back to like the basic needs of what you need in the relationship, right? So it's like, if you suddenly feel like your partner doesn't care about you, we want to talk about, what do you need from your partner to feel like he really cares about me? Do you need
Yeah.
him to spend more time with you?
Mhm.
How can we set that up? How can we,
Mhm.
figure out, when can you go out with your partner? You feel like you're not being heard, or that your feelings are not being validated. A lot of it is about, do you know how you're feeling? Because sometimes it's like, I'm not feeling good, but it's like to actually pinpoint and be like, okay, but I'm
Difficult.
actually feeling ashamed. I'm experiencing grief,
Yeah.
and sometimes that manifests itself in like an angry way.
Mhm.
And the partner can be like, why are you so angry? Why are you upset at me? Not right, because sometimes it's, you know emotions kind of overlap. Like, instead of like showing that you're feeling, grief and sadness, right? Because in order for you to express those feelings, you have to feel like safe to be vulnerable. It's a lot easier to show feelings of anger,
Mhm.
right? So we want to get to the root of, what is it that you're feeling? What changes do we want to implement in place to really get to that? A lot of things also, we do some like inner child work
Mhm.
also, because sometimes
Mhm.
when you become a parent, it reminds you a lot of, you know how your childhood was like, and the needs that that weren't met when you were a child.
Yeah.
So, this feeling of like, now that I'm a parent, I would never do what my mom did to me or my dad did to me. And we kind of go back and we say, let's talk about these moments when you really needed your parent, right? Because this feeling of like, I had a
Mhm.
baby and my mom or dad are not there for me in a way that I thought that they would be there.
Right.
We talk about, were they there for you when you were a child? And going
Mhm.
back to the moments where you felt like, I really needed my mom. And it's like, okay, what do you want to tell younger you during those moments? And whether it's like, I love you and it's okay and I'm here
Yeah.
for you, right?